When did fake it until you make it backfire? I hired a Mandarin translator for a game I'm developing. Ran her translations through Google Translate to find they were a good match. Too good a match. Showed it to a friend of mine who's from China. Told me the translator just Google translated everything and that the end result was barely comprehensible. I took orchestra in elementary school and I eventually realized that I was just not going to understand violin. But I still wanted to be in orchestra because it had some perks. So, whenever we had lesson, I put my fingers over the strings and moved my bow around like I meant it. When we had to play individually, I had to do it for real. I thought maybe, by some miracle, I'd get it and play normally. I didn't. When, due to a tight budget on a magazine I edited, way back when, we couldn't afford a fashion correspondent, so I did it myself under an assumed female name. I'm male, and didn't tell anyone. Surprisingly, it was quite well received. Ran for 3 months or so before I got invited to a clothing launch. I knew a girl who would apply to jobs she was unqualified for, including a job at NASA and Apple. She lied about her qualifications on her resumes. She landed several high-paying jobs, but would get fired after a month or two once her co-workers realized she did not have the skills to fulfill her duties. She would boast on Facebook about how she landed her dream job every few months. Not sure what she's doing now, since I haven't spoken to her in years. I believe she moved to another country. Oh, and she took credit for the Mars rover and for the Beatles on iTunes. At Nelson Mandela's funeral, people took note of the sign language interpreter that seemed to just be making random hand gestures instead of actual sign language. Turns out he had made quite a few appearances previously, and nobody had caught on that he knew literally no sign language. To me, this dude is just the poster child for fake it till you make it. Got a job working in an insurance company reviewing contracts. Had no ducking idea what I was doing, and thought I could just learn it and I'd be fine eventually. Lasted 6 months and they kicked me out. Similar story for me, got a job at a mortgage broker. Their limited training was meant for people who had already worked in the industry, not newbies like me. I'm good at test taking, so I passed the mortgage originator licensing exam on the first try. Had no idea what I was doing trying to sell mortgages though, and without income from commissions, I was making minimum wage. Eventually the boss found out I was applying for other jobs, gave me an ultimatum. Quit looking for other jobs or quit working for him. I asked him for a box to carry my stuff out. Place went under in 6 months anyway. I went on to get a job I was qualified for, that I've now had for 10 years. This reminds me of a Tifu post where OP moved to a new neighborhood for just a few months, and decided to take some LSD to break it in. OP thought it was a good idea to go for a walk, and when he went outside, his new neighbor greeted him. Being on LSD and a bit of an introvert, he avoided conversation by speaking French, as he knew enough to get by, and did not plan on staying there for an extended period of time. This went on for about 8 months, longer than he expected to stay there, and eventually the neighbor had a friend of hers over who also spoke French and tried to start up a conversation with him. That's when he was like, yeah, I don't speak French. I was 8 years old, and I told my dance teacher I could do a backbend. I couldn't, so she moved me up a level in acro and put me in a special role for our recital. For the next week my mom tried to help me get a backbend, but it wasn't happening, and I had to come clean. Luckily she didn't get too mad. I had to move back down a level, but I still got to keep my special role. Got a part-time job as a bartender to help with bills. Told them I knew how to bartend. I can pour a whiskey, coke and beer, so just figured I'd pick up the rest as I went along. First week I was serving to get to know the menu, and someone called in sick. Owner makes me bartend. So I'm doing fine, just beers and a few mixed drinks. Then a party of about 40 people coming from a wedding come in and starts asking for all these different shots, different specialty drinks, etc. Totally shit my pants. When I thought I was cool enough to eat edibles with no tolerance in Colorado before the airport to go back home, it hit me during the security checkpoint. The pressure behind my eyes began to build. The strange feeling of having to poop traveled from my head to my toes, and at this point I knew I had taken too much. I had sunglasses on, so only having to deal with security for a few moments I was able to get through this with little problems. I had an hour and a half before my plane boarded. My brother met a girl. He also ate edibles but had a tolerance, and was walking around with her while I was too high to function. The terminal was full, no seats anywhere. No problem, I'll just sit awkwardly on the floor the wrong way and stare at these people. "Sir, are you okay?" one asks. My sunglasses were on, so I pretend to not hear them. "Why are you staring at me?" The chicken beckons. I realize my sunglasses are minimum shading, so they can't see my eyes, just staring into them. "Sorry, there's nowhere to sit," I manage to say back. My anxiety at this point is through the roof, so I apologize and find somewhere else to lay down in the terminal. I find a spot near the front of the terminal near boarding area / help desk, so if I take a nap I know I'll be woken up by the line that forms / people helping me. There's maybe 50 to 60 people near me, all in the rows of seating, and I position myself legs first at them, with my head on my backpack and take a nap. I don't know how long I napped for, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I woke up startled to an extremely loud sound. It sounded like a plane had hit the building from the vibration. Turns out, I had let out the loudest and most pungent fart I've ever had, deep out of my insides. I don't move. I have my sunglasses on still, and had forgotten the encounter with the chicken earlier, so I act like I'm asleep. I blasted maybe 10 people directly with my fart, and all 10 of them got up and moved immediately. The terminal is shaken up, the laughs are deep, and everyone is looking at me. The cute girls I noticed on my way in are pointing and laughing at me. The airport workers left the stand and are staring at me, talking into their walkie-talkies laughing. I didn't move until the plane boarded, and in line everyone was still talking about it, and the staff couldn't look me in the face when I had to go through the desk with my ticket. TLDR, edibles made me an idiot, and I cleared a row of terminal seating with a pungent gas blast while pretending to be asleep. Okay, I guess it ultimately didn't backfire, but it's a pretty good story I was told in film school years ago. Back in the 80s/90s, a guy snagged an interview for a camera operating job at a TV production company that was way above his experience level. The interviewer gave him a camera, said, "Okay, take this apart and lay it all out for me. You have 20 minutes, and left him there. After panicking for a minute, he walked down the hall, found a technician working and asked him to take apart the camera for him, which he did. Interviewer comes back, says good work. Now put it back together, and goes off to put out some other fires. Our guy tracks down the tech, who obliges again, and he was hired. When I heard this story, the guy had worked in the field 15 or so years, so I guess things worked out. My parents have a video of me playing the trombone in the elementary school band concert, after my flute broke and there was no other flute to give me. I told my mom before I was really nervous, since I've literally never touched a trombone. I sat down in my concert chair, and the only other trombone looked at me, said, "Just slide the thing up and down and no one will ever know." And you know, I went hard. I was jamming out Toad's Peas Beans like I was a world-class jazz musician. My parents still bring it up that I faked it so hard. My teacher eventually caught on, and since we still had no more flutes, I was transferred to percussion and played the triangle. Is anyone on this plane a doctor? I'm a doctor. Of philosophy. Guy I used to work with told me about when he used to work as an electrician apprentice at a plant. When there was nothing to do, which apparently was most of the time, the lead guy and him would walk out to a random spot in the plant, with a ladder, a conduit bender, and a bent piece of conduit. Then one of them would stand on top of the ladder, and the other on the ground holding the conduit, and they'd just chit chat all day. If any of the bosses wandered by, they'd nod and pass the piece of conduit up to the guy on the ladder, who would then make a show of trying to fit it in somewhere. Said they both made it through 3 rounds of layoffs doing that. I have a friend who, when she's drunk, likes to speak in Spanish. Except, I taught her all the Spanish she knows, and I only took high school Spanish. Anyway, I am having a barbecue, and she hits it off with my friend from Peru. She speaks a little Spanish to him. They exchange numbers. She uses my wife, who speaks Spanish, to text him back and forth. They set up a date. She showed up to the bar before him. When he walked in, she gave him a hug and whispered, "I don't speak Spanish." He whispered back, "I knew the whole time." Went to visit my older cousin in a big city, small town girl. Before going out, he told me that the friends we would be meeting are super snobby, and would probably make fun of me if I told them I was from small town A. Today I would tell him to get better friends, but when I was 18, I just wanted to fit in. We agree I would tell them I'm from city X. So the blonde bombshell in the group, 6 years older, starts talking to me while my cousin and his friend head off to buy shots. "Where are you from?" City X. "OMG, me too." She proceeds to ask me which school I went to, which coffee shop was my favorite, and where my parents work, just making polite conversation. Of course, I make up an entire fake life story. My cousin gets back to the table with the shots, and I have never been more grateful for the opportunity to put alcohol in my mouth and stop words from coming out. At seeing me knock back my shot like an animal, my cousin forgets our cover story and loudly proclaims, "Good God. You don't have to drink like you do in small town A, just chill." I did not look at bombshell for the rest of the night. I have seldom wanted the earth to swallow me as much as I did in that moment. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen is that you do make it. Because when you do fake it to make it, you still have to fake it to keep it. I'm still in the same career field faking that I care about numbers and competition and wearing nice clothes. Advice to my younger self, if you have to fake it till you make it, you don't want to make it. I work as an accountant with a theater background. I'm 6 years in, and I'm working solo with no one above me in the company besides the owners. I have an audit, a $16 million lock to acquire, and another company we just purchased. This is the tipping point, I'm sure. When I was a teenager, I got a weed brownie from my dealer. I had never done edibles before, so I was super excited. I decided to eat it before Thanksgiving, so I would have a nice high and all this good food to eat. He warned me that it was strong, and to only eat half of it. I ate the half, and after like 15 minutes I wasn't feeling anything, so I decided to eat the other half too. I didn't know that with edibles it takes a while to kick in, and wasn't instant like smoking. By the time dinner came by, I was very stoned, like too much for my own comfort. My aunt and uncle were there too, along with my little cousin who was like 4 at the time. I went upstairs to join my family, and thought I could keep it together long enough for a quick dinner and nobody would be the wiser. That was not the case. I was so stoned that I could not look at anyone, so I just awkwardly stared at my food and gave one-word answers when my family tried to talk to me. It made things incredibly uncomfortable for everyone. After about 15 minutes, I could not take it anymore, so I just picked up my plate and went downstairs to my room. My mom followed me and wanted to know what the hell was wrong with me. I admitted to her that I ate a weed brownie and was incredibly stoned, and asked if she could just leave me alone because I was too high to deal with things right now. She was cool about it and waited until I came down to yell at me about ruining Thanksgiving dinner. The guys who act like they're ex-special forces on the first day of basic training, because they were in junior reserve officers training corps in high school. I remember one saying, "I've basically already done this every year since I was a freshman," as we got off the bus. Idiot washed out by week 2. I had a job that I was way underqualified for, yet I still was surprisingly given the offer. 8 months in, the fact really started to show that I wasn't the assumed genius/savior the hiring manager thought I was. Fortunately, I got offered a different job by someone who wasn't really desperate to hire. I taught some anatomy and physiology labs to pre-nursing majors. These girls knew more about anatomy and physiology than I did. I'm an expert in ecology, but somehow I got the job of teaching this class. I figured I'd just look at the answers on the worksheets as the semester went on. When I finally got the student feedback, it was a blow to my sense of confidence. About half of them did indeed notice that I had just been looking at the ducking worksheet answers.